The baby shower was meant to be perfect, and Sarah Chen had made sure it was. Pink and gold balloons cascaded from the ceiling of their spacious living room. Delicate finger sandwiches were arranged on her grandmother's china, and the scent of white roses filled the air. She watched her pregnant daughter Emma glow as friends and family gathered around, cooing over tiny onesies and hand-knitted blankets. "Mom, this is absolutely beautiful," Emma said, squeezing Sarah's hand. At 24, she had Marcus's strong jawline, but Sarah's gentle eyes. "Thank you for making this so special." Sarah smiled, though something cold had settled in her chest months ago and never quite left. "Anything for my first grandbaby." She glanced across the room where Marcus stood with a group of his business associates, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled, his expensive suit immaculate. To everyone else, he looked like the successful real estate developer he was, the devoted husband and father, celebrating his daughter's milestone. Only Sarah knew better. For 22 years, she had been the perfect wife. While Marcus built his empire, she had raised Emma, managed their household with military precision, and used her financial planning expertise to carefully manage their personal investments. She had attended every business dinner, smiled at every company party, and never once complained when Marcus worked late nights that stretched into early mornings. She had been so perfect, in fact, that Marcus had grown comfortable. Comfortable enough to think she was naive. Comfortable enough to believe she would never question the late nights, the mysterious business trips, or the way he guarded his phone like a state secret. But Sarah Chen was a financial planner, trained to notice discrepancies and patterns, and for the past 6 months, she had been noticing quite a lot. "Sarah, darling, you've outdone yourself," gushed Mrs. Patterson from next door, balancing a plate of petit fours. "Emma is so lucky to have you." "We're the lucky ones," Sarah replied automatically, her trained smile never wavering. Across the room, Marcus's phone buzzed. She watched him glance at it, his face softening in a way it hadn't for her in years. His thumb moved quickly across the screen, typing a response with the kind of tender attention he once reserved for her. Sarah's grip tightened almost imperceptibly on her champagne flute. She knew exactly who was texting him. Vivian Torres, his business associate, with the perfect figure and ambitious smile. 32 years old, unmarried, and apparently quite comfortable with married men. The investigation had started innocently enough, Sarah simply trying to understand why their joint accounts showed irregular transfers, why Marcus suddenly needed cash for business opportunities he couldn't quite explain. But private investigator Daniel Morrison had uncovered far more than financial irregularities. Photos, hotel receipts, text messages recovered from deleted files, a paper trail of lies stretching back 2 years. Sarah had stared at those photos for hours when they first arrived, studying Marcus's face as he kissed another woman, seeing a happiness there that had been absent from their marriage for so long she'd forgotten it existed. The betrayal should have destroyed her. Instead, it had crystallized something sharp and purposeful in her chest. "Mum?" Emma's voice broke through her thoughts. "You look a million miles away." Sarah refocused on her daughter's concerned face. "Just thinking about how proud I am of you, sweetheart, and how much your life is about to change." She wasn't lying. Emma's life was about to change dramatically, but not in the way anyone expected. As the afternoon sun slanted through the windows, casting everything in golden light, Sarah surveyed her perfect party, her perfect home, her perfect life that was built on lies so elaborate she almost admired their construction. Marcus caught her eye across the room and raised his glass slightly, smiling. For a moment, she saw the man she'd fallen in love with in college, charming, ambitious, full of dreams they were going to build together. Then his phone buzzed again, and the illusion shattered. Sarah raised her own glass in return, her smile serene. Let him think she was still the devoted, trusting wife. Let him believe he was clever enough to fool her. After all, She had been preparing for this moment for months. The final act was about to begin. The room buzzed with gentle conversation and laughter as Emma opened another gift, a hand-carved wooden rocking horse from Marcus's mother. Sarah was refilling the punch bowl when she heard the sharp tap of metal against glass. The conversations died as everyone turned toward the sound. Marcus stood in the center of the room, his champagne flute raised, his face wearing an expression Sarah had never seen before, a mixture of nervous excitement and cold determination. "If I could have everyone's attention," he said, his voice carrying that commanding tone he used in boardrooms. "I have an announcement to make." Sarah's pulse quickened, but she kept her face carefully neutral. This was it. The moment she'd been expecting, though she'd thought he might wait until after the guests left. Apparently, Marcus had decided to make it a public spectacle. "As you all know, family is everything," he began, and Sarah had to admire his audacity. "Which is why it's important to be honest about the changes coming to our family." Emma smiled expectantly, probably thinking he was about to make some sweet speech about becoming a grandfather. Several guests leaned forward, anticipating heartwarming words about new beginnings. "Sarah and I will be getting divorced," Marcus announced with the casual tone of someone discussing the weather. "I'm in love with someone else, someone who truly understands me and shares my vision for the future. Her name is Vivian Torres, and we've been together for 2 years. The silence that followed was deafening. Sarah watched as the color drained from Emma's face, as Mrs. Patterson's mouth fell open, as Marcus's own mother gripped the arm of her chair. "I'll be moving out immediately," Marcus continued, apparently oblivious to the horror spreading across the faces around him. "Vivian and I are taking a trip to the Maldives to celebrate our new beginning together." "Dad," Emma's voice cracked. "What are you saying? This is my baby shower. How could you—" "Life doesn't stop for parties, sweetheart," Marcus said with breathtaking callousness. "Sometimes you have to seize happiness when you find it." As if summoned by his words, the front door opened. Vivian Torres walked in, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. She was stunning in that effortless way that money could buy. Designer dress, perfect hair, skin that glowed with youth and expensive treatments. She moved to Marcus's side with practiced confidence, sliding her arm through his. "I'm sorry it had to come out this way," Vivian said, her voice honey-sweet with just enough false sympathy to make it insulting. "But we couldn't keep pretending anymore." Emma burst into tears, her hands protectively covering her rounded belly. Several guests rushed to comfort her, while others simply stared in shock. Sarah's mother-in-law was making small, wounded sounds, as if the words were physical blows. All eyes turned to Sarah. She stood frozen by the punch bowl, the crystal ladle still in her hand, her face a mask of devastation. She let her shoulders shake slightly, let her breathing become shallow and rapid. To everyone watching, she was a woman whose perfect world had just imploded in the most humiliating way possible. Inside, however, Sarah felt nothing but ice-cold satisfaction. Finally, after months of watching Marcus sneak around, of pretending not to notice his lies, of carefully documenting every betrayal, finally he had given her exactly what she needed: public witnesses to his cruelty, undeniable proof of his character, the perfect justification for everything she was about to do. "Sarah?" Marcus's voice held a note of impatience, as if her shock was inconveniencing him. "Did you hear what I said?" She looked up at him with wide, wounded eyes. I don't understand. This is Emma's day. How could you—" "Sometimes life forces difficult decisions," he said, straightening his tie. "I'm sure you'll be fine. You're a strong woman." Strong. Yes, she was. Stronger than he could possibly imagine. "The car is waiting outside, darling," Vivian murmured to Marcus, checking her phone. "Our flight leaves in 3 hours." Sarah watched them prepare to leave, to abandon the wreckage of her daughter's special day, to jet off to paradise, while Emma sobbed, and the guests whispered in horror. Let them go. Let them think they'd won. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The moment Marcus and Vivian's car disappeared down the driveway, Sarah's mask finally slipped. But instead of collapsing into grief, She straightened her shoulders and moved with sudden, purposeful efficiency. "Emma, sweetheart," she said gently, kneeling beside her sobbing daughter, "I need you to trust me. Everything is going to be okay." "How can you say that?" Emma choked out. "He just destroyed our family in front of everyone." Sarah cupped her daughter's face with steady hands. "Because I've been preparing for this day for 6 months. It had started with a single discrepancy, a $15,000 0 cents withdrawal from their joint investment account that Marcus couldn't adequately explain. As a financial planner, Sarah knew that small inconsistencies often revealed larger problems. So she had started digging. What she found was a masterpiece of deception. The first clue came when she noticed Marcus accessing their home computer at odd hours, quickly closing windows when she entered the room. So Sarah had installed keystroke logging software, perfectly legal on their shared computer, and discovered a world of hidden accounts, encrypted communications, and financial transfers that painted a picture of systematic theft. Marcus hadn't just been unfaithful. He'd been stealing from their business partnerships, skimming from development projects, and funneling money into offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Over $2,300,000 0 cents had been moved in the past 18 months alone. The private investigator Daniel Morrison had been worth every penny of his substantial fee. A former FBI forensic accountant, he'd traced the money trails with surgical precision while simultaneously documenting the affair. The evidence filled 3 thick binders: bank records, hotel receipts, photographs, and most damning of all, Marcus's own communications, detailing both his embezzlement schemes and his romantic escapades. Sarah had spent months photographing documents when Marcus showered, recording phone conversations from the extension in her home office, and building an airtight legal case. She'd even secretly consulted with divorce attorney Rebecca Martinez, mapping out every step of what would happen when the moment came. "Mrs. Patterson," Sarah called to her neighbor, who was still staring in shock, "could you please help Emma upstairs? I have some phone calls to make." As the guests slowly filed out, murmuring among themselves, Sarah walked calmly to her home office and opened her laptop. A folder labeled Emergency Protocols contained a dozen pre-drafted emails, each one carefully crafted for this exact moment. Her first call was to Rebecca Martinez. "It's time," Sarah said simply when her lawyer answered. "Actually did it at the baby shower?" Rebecca's voice was incredulous. "In front of 30 witnesses. I have it all on video. The security cameras were running for Emma's memories." Jesus. "Okay, I'm filing everything tonight. Adultery, financial fraud, and breach of fiduciary duty. With your evidence and his public admission, this will be swift and brutal." Sarah's second call was to First National Bank. "This is Sarah Chen, account holder for the Marcus and Sarah Chen joint accounts. I need to implement the freeze protocols we discussed." She'd spent weeks preparing for this moment, working with the bank manager to ensure she could protect their assets the instant Marcus revealed his betrayal. Within minutes, every joint account was frozen, every shared credit card canceled. Marcus's business cards, which she'd secretly discovered were linked to their personal accounts, would be declined within the hour. Her third call was to the IRS hotline. "I have evidence of significant tax evasion and unreported offshore accounts," she said calmly. "I'm sending documentation now." The emails she'd prepared began flowing out. To Marcus's business partners, detailing his embezzlement with attached evidence. To the State Real Estate Commission, providing proof of his fraudulent practices. To the SEC, documenting his securities violations. But the psychological warfare, that was personal. Sarah opened her social media accounts and began typing the post she'd crafted weeks ago, adjusting it slightly for the day's specific events. Today was supposed to be a celebration of new life and family joy, my daughter's baby shower. Instead, my husband of 22 years chose this moment to announce he was leaving me for his mistress, with whom he's been having an affair for 2 years. While I'm heartbroken by his betrayal, I'm not entirely surprised. You see, I've known about Vivian Torres for months. What Marcus doesn't know is that I've also discovered his embezzlement of over $2 million, 0 cents from our business partnerships and his hidden offshore accounts. I tried to save our marriage, but I couldn't save a man who was stealing from his own family. The authorities have been notified. Sometimes the people we love most are the ones who hurt us deepest. Betrayed but not broken. Truth. Starting over. She attached 3 carefully selected screenshots. Marcus's text to Vivian from their bedroom saying, "Can't wait to be free of this charade." A bank statement showing one of his illegal transfers and a photo of them kissing outside the hotel where they'd been meeting. The post went live at 8:47 p.m. By 9:15 it had 50 likes and 20 comments. By 10 o'clock it had been shared 12 times. By midnight it had reached viral status in their social and professional circles, with over 300 shares and countless comments expressing support for Sarah and outrage at Marcus's behavior. Sarah's phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "Mom, I just saw your post. I can't believe you knew all this time. Why didn't you tell me?" She typed back. "Because I needed him to expose himself completely. Now everyone knows exactly who he really is." At 11:30 p.m., as Sarah was programming new security codes for their home alarm system, her phone rang. The caller ID showed Marcus's number. She almost smiled as she declined the call. Let him wonder. Let him worry. Let him slowly discover that his comfortable life of lies and stolen money was crumbling around him while he sat in an airport lounge, probably trying to use a credit card that would no longer work. Sarah looked around her home, their home, which would legally be hers alone soon enough. Tomorrow she would change the locks. Tonight she would sleep peacefully for the first time in months. The hunter had become the hunted, and Marcus Chen had no idea what was coming for him. Marcus's first hint that something was wrong came at the Mandarin Oriental in Singapore during their layover to the Maldives. The concierge's polite smile faltered as she ran his platinum card for the 3rd time. "I'm sorry, sir, but this card has been declined. Do you have another form of payment?" "That's impossible," Marcus said, his voice tight with embarrassment as other travelers glanced their way. "Try this one." He handed over his Business American Express, the one with no preset spending limit. Declined. Vivian shifted uncomfortably beside him, her designer luggage suddenly feeling heavier. Maybe it's just a technical issue. Marcus's phone had been buzzing incessantly since they'd boarded their first flight, but he'd ignored it, assuming it was Sarah calling to beg him to reconsider. Now, with a growing sense of dread, he checked his messages. 47 missed calls. 63 text messages, emails flooding his inbox. The first voicemail was from his business partner, Tom Rodriguez. "Marcus, what the hell is going on? I just got a package with bank records showing you've been stealing from our developments. Call me back immediately." The second was from his accountant. "The IRS called. They have documentation of offshore accounts I've never seen. We need to talk, now." The third was from his lawyer. "Don't say anything to anyone until we speak. This is bad, Marcus. Really bad." Marcus's hands began to shake as he scrolled through the messages. Every business associate, every partner, every professional contact seemed to be calling with the same urgent panic in their voices. "What's wrong?" Vivian asked, noticing his pallor. Marcus opened his banking app. Account frozen. He tried another. Frozen. The offshore accounts he'd so carefully hidden showed 0 balances, with notes about federal seizure orders. "We need to go home," he said quietly. "What? Marcus, we just got here. Our suite in the Maldives is going to have to wait." He was already pulling up flight information, trying to book tickets back to Seattle. His credit cards were useless, but he had some cash. Not much, but enough to get them home. The return journey was a nightmare of economy seating and Vivian's increasingly shrill complaints. By the time they landed in Seattle 18 hours later, Marcus's phone had accumulated over 100 messages. The local news had picked up the story. Prominent developer accused of embezzlement and public abandonment of family. Sarah's social media post had been shared nearly 1,000 times. The comments were brutal. What kind of monster leaves his wife at their daughter's baby shower? Hope they throw the book at him. Sarah Chen deserves so much better. When they reached what had been Marcus's home, the locks had been changed. A security guard sat in a car outside, clearly hired by Sarah. Marcus pressed the doorbell repeatedly, but no one answered. "Sarah!" he shouted at the windows. "We need to talk." The security guard approached. "Sir, I'm going to need you to leave the property. Mrs. Chen has a restraining order. This is my house, not according to the court documents I have. Please leave or I'll call the police." Vivian was already walking away, her phone pressed to her ear. Marcus caught fragments of her conversation. "Need you to pick me up? No, it's over. Complete disaster." By the time Marcus found a hotel room he could afford with his remaining cash, Vivian had disappeared entirely. Her belongings from his car were gone, her phone went straight to voicemail, and her social media accounts had blocked him. The meeting with his lawyer the next morning was devastating. "The evidence against you is overwhelming," Rebecca Sterling explained, sliding documents across her desk. "Your wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, has been building this case for months. Bank records, recordings, photographs, witness statements. The IRS has frozen everything while they investigate. The state has suspended your real estate license pending their investigation. And Marcus?" She looked at him with something approaching pity. "Your business partners are all filing lawsuits. They want their money back, plus damages." "How did she know?" Marcus asked, his voice hoarse. "She's a financial planner, Marcus. She understands money trails better than most forensic accountants. You got sloppy, and she's very, very smart." Back at the hotel, Marcus tried calling Emma. She answered on the 5th ring. "What do you want, Dad?" "Emma, sweetheart, I can explain." "Explain what?" "How you stole millions of dollars? How you humiliated Mom in front of everyone? How you abandoned your family for some woman who won't even take your calls now?" "It's not that simple." "Actually, it is. Mom showed me everything. The bank records, the hotels, the lies. Did you really think she wouldn't find out? Did you think she was stupid?" Marcus felt tears stinging his eyes. "I made mistakes, but I love you. You love yourself, Dad. That's all you've ever loved." Emma's voice was cold, so unlike his little girl. "Don't call me again." The line went dead. That evening, Marcus sat in his cheap hotel room, watching the local news coverage of his downfall. His professional headshot filled the screen as the anchor detailed his alleged crimes. Former colleagues were interviewed, all expressing shock and distancing themselves from him. The reporters stood outside his former home, where Sarah appeared briefly to make a statement. "I'm grateful that the truth has come to light," she said calmly. "My daughter and I are focused on moving forward and healing from this betrayal." She looked beautiful, Marcus realized, composed and strong in a way he'd never noticed when he was taking her for granted. His phone rang. "Unknown number. Is this Marcus Chen?" The voice was official, cold. "This is Agent Williams with the FBI Financial Crimes Unit. We need to schedule an interview." Marcus closed his eyes and let the phone fall to the bed. In less than 24 hours, Sarah had systematically destroyed everything he'd built. His reputation, his wealth, his family, his freedom. All gone. And the worst part was, he was beginning to realize he deserved every bit of it. The King County Courthouse was packed with reporters, curious onlookers and former associates eager to distance themselves from Marcus Chen's spectacular fall. What should have been a private family matter had become a public crucifixion, and Marcus sat at the defendant's table, feeling like a man walking to his execution. Sarah entered the courtroom with quiet dignity, dressed in a navy blue suit that conveyed both professionalism and strength. She didn't look at Marcus as she took her seat beside Rebecca Martinez, her jaw set with determination. Judge Patricia Hendricks, known for her no-nonsense approach to financial crimes, reviewed the evidence with methodical precision. The documents Sarah had compiled painted a devastating picture: 2 years of systematic theft, fraudulent transfers, tax evasion, and personal betrayal. "Mrs. Chen," the judge said, "please present your evidence." Sarah stood, her voice steady as she addressed the court. "Your Honor, my husband didn't just betray our marriage. He betrayed every person who trusted him with their financial future." She gestured to the boxes of evidence. The documentation shows that Marcus Chen embezzled $2,300,000 0 cents from joint business ventures, hid assets in offshore accounts, and used our personal credit lines to fund his affair. She clicked a remote, and bank records appeared on the courtroom screen. These transfers coincide exactly with his romantic getaways with Vivian Torres. He was literally using stolen money to finance his infidelity. Marcus's lawyer, David Kim, stood desperately. Your Honor, my client admits to marital indiscretions, but Mrs. Chen's evidence was obtained through potentially illegal surveillance. Evidence was gathered legally from shared accounts and shared devices. Rebecca Martinez interrupted smoothly. Mrs. Chen had every right to monitor their joint financial holdings. Judge Hendricks studied the bank records. Mr. Chen, these offshore accounts were never declared on your tax returns? Marcus felt sweat beading on his forehead. Your Honor, I can explain. I'm sure you can. Save it for your criminal trial. The devastating evidence continued. Audio recordings of Marcus bragging to Vivian about his brilliant money-hiding schemes, photographs of forged documents, email trails showing his systematic deception of business partners. When Marcus finally took the stand in his own defense, his desperation was palpable. Sarah is vindictive, he pleaded. She's destroying me because I fell in love with someone else. Yes, I made mistakes, but this level of retaliation? Mr. Chen, Judge Hendricks interrupted. Are you suggesting that documenting your theft of over $2 million constitutes vindictive behavior? I was going to pay it back, feeling increasingly controlled, that they weren't relieved. The resulting preservation. Marcus's defense crumbled under the weight of evidence. By afternoon, Judge Hendricks was ready to render her decision. I've rarely seen such comprehensive documentation of financial fraud combined with such callous personal betrayal, she said. Mr. Chen, you will retain only your personal effects and your pension, what remains of it after restitution. Everything else goes to Mrs. Chen, who will oversee the return of stolen funds to the defrauded partners. The gavel fell with finality. Marcus had lost everything. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed as Marcus emerged, his face gray with defeat. Sarah was already at her car when he broke away from the crowd and approached her. Sarah, please. Can we talk? She turned, her eyes cold but not cruel. What could we possibly have to say to each other, Marcus? I never meant for it to go this far. The money. I was going to put it back. And Vivian, she was just... I was confused, going through something. Confused. Sarah's voice was dangerously quiet. You were confused for 2 years? When you were transferring our daughter's college fund to pay for hotel rooms? When you were stealing from Tom Rodriguez's kid's future? When you chose my daughter's baby shower to humiliate me in front of everyone we know? Marcus's shoulders shook. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know I don't deserve it, but is there any chance, any possibility of forgiveness? Sarah studied his face for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady and final. Marcus, you didn't just betray me. You betrayed every value we claimed to share. You stole from people who trusted you. You lied to your daughter. You turned our marriage into a performance while you lived a completely different life. She paused, letting the words sink in. But I want you to know something. The money you stole, what the government doesn't take for restitution, I'm donating to 3 women's shelters that help women escape financial abuse. Marcus's face crumpled. Sarah, your legacy will be helping women who were trapped the way you tried to trap me. Women who thought they had no options because their husbands controlled all the money. She opened her car door. Maybe someday that will mean something to you. As she drove away, Marcus stood alone on the courthouse steps, photographers capturing his defeat. He had lost his wife, his daughter, his fortune, his reputation, and soon his freedom. But perhaps worst of all, he had finally understood exactly what he had thrown away, and it was far too late to get any of it back. 6 months later, Sarah Chen stood in the bright, airy office of her new financial consulting firm, watching the Seattle skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows. The brass nameplate on her desk read, Sarah Chen, CFP, Women's Financial Independence Consulting. Her first client of the day was Jennifer Walsh, a trembling woman whose husband had been hiding their savings in cryptocurrency accounts she couldn't access. "Or says I'm too stupid to understand money," Jennifer whispered, clutching a tissue. "But I know something's wrong. I just don't know what to do." Sarah handed her a cup of tea and smiled with warm understanding. "Jennifer, you're not stupid. You're smart enough to know when something doesn't feel right. That's why you're here. Let's figure out exactly what's happening with your finances, and then we'll make sure you're protected." Her business had grown beyond her wildest expectations. Word had spread through women's networks about the financial planner who had systematically dismantled her cheating husband's empire. Sarah now specialized in helping women secretly audit their finances, protect their assets, and build escape plans from financially abusive relationships. The irony wasn't lost on her that Marcus's betrayal had given her the most meaningful career of her life. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. "On my way to the hospital. Contractions are 5 minutes apart." Sarah's heart leaped. After 6 months of careful healing, her relationship with Emma had emerged stronger than ever. The initial anger had given way to understanding, and Emma had eventually thanked her mother for having the courage to expose the truth. "I'm so sorry, Jennifer," Sarah said, gathering her coat. "I need to reschedule. My daughter is having my granddaughter." "Oh my goodness, go!" Jennifer beamed. "And congratulations." 3 hours later, Sarah held baby Lily Chen Morrison in her arms, marveling at tiny fingers and the soft shock of dark hair. Emma's husband David stood beside them, his eyes wet with tears. "Mom," Emma said softly, "I want you to know what you did took incredible strength. I'm proud to be your daughter." Sarah kissed her granddaughter's forehead, feeling a peace she hadn't experienced in years. This was what mattered. This was real. Meanwhile, 300 miles away in a federal minimum security prison, Marcus Chen sat at a metal table, writing another letter he knew would never be read. The stack of returned mail on his shelf grew weekly. Letters to Sarah, to Emma, to former business partners who wanted nothing to do with him. He'd been sentenced to 5 years for embezzlement and tax evasion. His cellmate had shown him a wedding announcement from the local paper. Vivian Torres had married a tech executive just 4 months after Marcus's conviction. She'd never visited, never written, never acknowledged his existence after his money disappeared. "Chen," the guard called. "Mail call." Marcus looked up hopefully, but it was just another legal document. His former partners were still pursuing civil suits, trying to recover their losses. He would be in debt for the rest of his life. He returned to his letter, trying once again to find words that could somehow convey his remorse, his understanding of what he'd lost, his desperate wish for some kind of redemption. But what words could possibly bridge the chasm he'd created? Back in Seattle, Sarah's phone showed 3 missed calls from the prison. She deleted the voicemails without listening, just as she had dozens of times before. Some bridges, once burned, could never be rebuilt. As she rocked baby Lily to sleep, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The betrayal that had shattered her old life had forced her to build something new and authentic. She was no longer the perfect wife who accommodated and overlooked. She was a woman who knew her worth, who helped other women discover theirs. "Your grandmother learned something important, little one," she whispered to the sleeping baby. "Sometimes the people who hurt us the most give us exactly what we need to become who we're meant to be." But outside, the Seattle rain painted patterns on the hospital windows, washing the world clean. Sarah smiled, holding her granddaughter close, surrounded by the family that truly mattered. Some revenge, she had learned, was best served not cold, but with perfect timing, absolute preparation, and the unwavering belief that justice and peace could coexist. The future stretched ahead, bright with possibility, and Sarah Chen was finally completely free.